Thank you so much for that, and it's such a pleasure and a privilege to have a panel like this. It's the three of the top thinkers that we have. My job is perhaps slightly complicated by the fact that all three of them are Sanjiv. So I have to probably be a little careful when I say, Sanjiv, what do you feel, and get all three of them answering at once. We do have some time for this session. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask each of our panelists to maybe speak for 7-8 minutes to 10 minutes, set the stage for how they think disruption is coming in their individual areas, what are they doing to plan for it, to prepare for it, and to move on from there. Then after that, we'll have a freewheeling discussion and then throw it open to all of you also for questions. Well, I was asked before I start off, and with a panel like this, of course, it's really tempting to just shut up and hand them the floor and sit back for the rest of the morning. But I was asked to also set the stage a little bit as to what it means to have disruption. So here's my tuppence for the next 2 or 3 minutes. I think it's increasingly becoming clear that we are in a period of rapidly advancing and increasing exponential change in a number of areas. A range of technologies are maturing, and these technologies are bringing them with themselves profound change. And I think if you look at the period 5 years or 10 years from now, the crucial question is going to be who was able to see those technologies, who was able to embrace them, who was able to move along with them, and who, at the end of the day, got left behind. I think one of the most perceptive, now which of these technologies are going to do the most amount of transformation is, of course, up in the air. Will it be artificial intelligence? Is it going to be blockchain? Is it going to be clean energy? Is it going to be electric? Is it going to be synthetic biology? Those questions are up there. But I think fundamentally each of us has to ask that question, what is the change that is coming? How is it going to affect me? How is it going to affect my industry? How is it going to affect my consumers? I think one of the most interesting things in this entire area that was once said to me and had a massive, profound change in my own life. I was interviewing Sundar Pichai, very happily ensconced as a television news anchor, was the CEO of the NDTV group at that time, got the chance to interview Sundar Pichai. And I said, this AI, he said, AI revolution is here. AI is going to transform everything. AI is coming. And I said, is it what AI? Who's going to come? What's going to happen? And he said, the real transformation from AI is going to come because people who are incumbents, people who already have businesses, people with domain knowledge will look at their own industries and say, how can I disrupt my business using AI? And it's when that happens that the real revolution will come. So I went back, sat down, scratched my head a little bit, quit my job at NDTV 2 years ago, sat in a basement for 7 to 8 months and said, all right, if he is correct and if AI has to come to transform, it made my life slightly easier by the fact that the business that I came from, television news, definitely deserves to be disrupted. I think most of you will agree that the quality of TV news has deteriorated rather alarmingly. It's true in other areas also. So a business which deserves to be disrupted, it's easier to disrupt. But that particular question and that particular answer that I eventually tried to come up with, is it going to work or not work, is the solutions are in everyone's hands. But I think it is incumbent upon all of us to really look at that disruption that is coming and see if we ourselves can lead it. And that's what the basic question is that I'm going to throw to these three gentlemen, because each of them are leaders and the leaders in some of the most powerful parts of the economy, whether it's FMCG, whether it's financial services, whether it's oil and gas and the PSU sector. These are the guiding lights of the Indian economy, and in general, these sectors obviously dominate the global economy. Are the incumbents going to bring the change and the disruption? Will there be challengers who are going to bring the disruption? Will it be a bit of both? Those are some of the questions we're going to hope for you to answer. Who'd like to go first? Will it be you, Sanjiv? Actually, I'm going to get Mr. Singh to start first, perhaps. Let's look at the threat part first, of the crisis, whether there's a threat and there's an opportunity. When you look at the landscape, chairman of Indian Oil, one of the largest PSUs, one of the largest oil companies, the most established players there right now. When you look at the world, what do you think would be the things that might threaten you might feel threatened by? Would it be the new technologies coming? He was briefly alluding to the fact that oil might come to an end at some point. Energy, cheap solar is going to be everywhere. Electric cars are going to be everywhere. There's no long-term future for the oil and gas industry. Is that the sort of a threat that can potentially come from disruption?
First of all, let me frame the question correctly.
I was waiting for you to do that.
Because I think disruptions are not going to threaten any particular sector or any particular company. They are going only to add to whatever value these companies are adding at the moment. If you would agree with me that till maybe 10 years ago, we were still talking about that the oil will last for another 50 years, 70 years, 100 years. Today, nobody is talking about the life of oil or the availability of oil in a finite period. I don't think anyone is talking about that. You might be hearing about the oil prices, you might be hearing about the oil demand going down, but I don't think today we are really worried about the finite availability of oil. Now this has happened because of disruption in the upstream sector predominantly, and also many times we don't realize that. A lot of pattern has changed because of the efficiency which has come into the way we are using oil or the way we are using energy. I'm sure the people of my generation would recall their days when a two-wheeler, typically a motorcycle, used to give average of 20 kilometers. I mean, today we are talking about average in 3 digits. All the two-wheelers today running are four-stroke engines. So there is a lot of efficiency which has been brought in by this. Even if we talk about India in particular, we are expecting a lot of growth of energy, including the growth of energy in the primary sector. I'm not saying growth of oil or growth of gas. I'm saying growth of energy or the growth of transportation sector. There is enough scope for all forms of energy which will be provided. Even if when we talk about disruption by EVs for the conventional transport sector, we have to look at the complete value chain. How we are generating electricity, how we are storing electricity, how we are discarding batteries. So we have to look at the complete life cycle of an alternative. And I'm sure that the most efficient one will survive test of the time. And the bigger objective will still remain environment, which will be strongly supported and added by economy of operations. So I think the technological solutions will add to whatever conventional business is happening.
So you're not seeing oil going away in the next 20, 30, 40 years?
Not at all. In fact, for a company like Indian Oil, the challenge is to meet the demand of oil in the coming years. Since 1998-99, the country decided to be self-sufficient in terms of petroleum products. And we built more refineries. We are self-sufficient today. If we don't build more refineries tomorrow, I'm sure that we'll have to import the petroleum products. Now, what is changing? I mean, there is a lot of shift towards cleaner fuels. Next year, first April, we will be, the whole of country will move to the cleanest fuel which is available globally anywhere in the world. So we move to the cleanest fuels. The automobile industry brings in the matching automobiles. The exhaust emissions we are better than a major part of America, except California and a couple of states. So that will be the level of our automobile industry next 1 year or so. And other forms of energy will also come. EVs will also come. We are also looking at using CNG or gas or LNG for automobile sector. So I think this adds value to the whole system.
All right. Mr. Mehta, turning to you, in the case of a company like yours, and of course Hindustan Lever, it's the colossus there in FMCG. The product itself may not change to that same extent. I mean, hopefully and presumably everyone will still want to wash themselves and wash their clothes and, be clean. Where then is the threat to an incumbent here? The threat part before we come to the opportunity.
Sure. FMCG had a very classical business model where we would invest a lot of money in understanding consumers, going to homes, understanding what the unmet needs are. Then we would come back and then we would have a very classical innovation cycle of developing prototypes, testing them out, then scaling them up through factory production, then massive distribution reach, millions of outlets. And then you would bombard the television, and I would call it spray and pray, and then wait for your consumers to pick it up. That's how the value would get created. Now, if you then break up the value chain, you can see that disruption could happen at every area. Yeah? Today, you don't need the classical consumer research because consumers are speaking to you at every point of time. What you need to do is decipher the trends, etc. Your in-house innovation gives way to open innovations. Yeah, there are molecules being developed. You need to tap into that. Yeah, you can get across, no longer rely on your own R&D. Then you are classical competitors. That would also change dramatically. It won't be what we normally think of, the Godrej, the P&Gs, the Nestle. The new age competitors would be the Flipkarts, the Amazon. Then there would be the new agile disruptors who would come and occupy the niche because the cost of operation would be very low. They may not own a single factory. They may not have their own distribution. And they would work in a very dramatically different way from a way a classical FMCG company would operate. You will not need the classical distribution muscle. You don't need television to bombard. Yeah, you could just use digital marketing and reach the consumers. So you could get disrupted in completely different ways. So that's where I would believe the challenge lies.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the disruption may not necessarily come from the product, but because there could be new ways of marketing and distribution which some other person could understand better than the incumbent, and that's where the threat could come from.
Absolutely. In a long term, of course, you can come out with a better molecule, which will make you more youthful. Yeah. Or you could come out with a gadget where you may not need a detergent powder, but just the power, the water, and the pressure could clean your clothes. But let's keep that aside for a moment, those kind of technological disruptions, and assume that you still need a liquid or a bar of soap to cleanse yourself. You still need a shampoo to have wonderful clean hair. You still need a skin cream to give you a flawless glowing skin. Assume that, but the business model could get disrupted dramatically.
Right, that's really interesting. Mr. Bajaj, the threat, because obviously there is a lot of innovation that the whole industry in finance is seeing. You're, of course, leading it, which is one of the reasons why we were talking yesterday about the sort of performance that Bajaj Finserv has already seen. What are the biggest threats then?
Vikram, the single biggest threat to incumbents is one of mindset. If most incumbent organizations are very homogeneous, are very hierarchical in the way they organize, decision making flows from top to down as much as we think we empower our people. Now, when you think of the fintech world, we can see thousands of fintechs trying out to get better at small parts of what a traditional bank or insurance company would do. So somebody could just become very good at home loans. Somebody could just become very efficient to take care of your travel insurance for 4 days instead of you having to pay for 30 days when you go overseas. And within existing organizations, most companies find it very difficult to change in the way they manage, the way they operate. But one would have to do that. Now, in an existing large setup, how do you collapse existing org structures? How do you collapse what grades and roles meant in an organization? How do you collapse your entire salary structures to, how do you encourage more project-driven innovation? How do you encourage youngsters who actually know a lot more about the digital world than the older people to come up with ideas and yet balance that with the experience that the older lot brings in? I think it's a huge people issue more than anything else. And the ones that are doing this well are bringing in a lot of talent from outside. And they are breaking those structures down. And that gets difficult to do because you do have something that works today. And I mean, I believe when you think of it top down, if most companies have an average CEO life of 3 to 5 years, India is better than what it is in the West. In the West, every 3 years, the CEO moves. So the CEO is really not concerned of what happens in year 4. Whereas many of these changes require a lot of hand-holding, a lot of experimentation, adopting within the company that it is okay to fail. Because if you don't fail, you'll never push the boundaries of what's the norm today for future success. So to me, it's a huge people issue.
If I could just take that forward, there's also, to some extent, a possible perception that people will have in giant incumbent companies, especially the ones that are successful, but say that there's more to lose. There is a certain risk that comes from trying new things, which is more than for a complete startup. Sometimes people have, for example, turned to me and said, whatever you're doing at Editorji, why couldn't you have done it inside an existing media company? And my answer for that has often been, you can't, because then you are interested in looking after existing television revenue or existing print revenue or existing, there's a business to protect. If you're a new startup and you're coming up and you have nothing to lose, you can say, yes, let's smash, grab, burn down existing models, try something completely different. It's different if you're a big bank. It's different if you're making a lot of profits, if you've got 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 workers. You have more to lose by trying disruption. Is that a fair thing to say?
That's the obvious challenge that those companies find. Disruption doesn't necessarily mean that you disrupt everything at the same time either. So you don't have to destroy your whole business to create a new one all in at the same time. But you have to destroy it bit by bit and recreate.
Okay, Mr. Mehta. If, for example, you're saying, let's try what you were saying, completely radical new ways of marketing or new ways of distribution, would you get that pushback saying, but hang on, look at our track record, look at the history, look at the profitability. We've always done things this way. Marketing heads saying, but wait a minute, we've gone with television and looking at TRPs, and it's paid us absolutely fantastic returns for 100 years or 50 years or 30 years or however long it is. Why do you want us to change it now?
A very valid question. Yeah, because you have a certain business model of how you create value. And the question would be, why are you destroying it? But when you look at yourselves from a long-term perspective, then things change dramatically. Yeah, because we are not here just for a few years. We've been here for 8 decades, and we believe that the company will remain here for several decades. And that is when you have to create room for yourself to reinvent. And as Sanjiv Bajaj rightly said, you don't burn down everything to create something new. Yeah, you start reinventing piece by piece. I'll give you how we are doing it in HUL. We started the journey about 2.5, 3 years back, and we set up a Digi Council. These are the tech-savvy people working in our business. They don't report to me. They're a level down. And we said, if we have such amazing talent in the company, how do we harness their creativity? How do we unleash their creativity? So we started experimenting. And my job as the chair of the Digi Council was to remove the roadblocks, yeah, and have a philosophy that failure is not the opposite of success. And if we don't fail, we are not stretching ourselves. So today we are at a stage where we are running about 85 experiments. Many have reached a stage of fruition. They have been scaled up. Now they're being rolled out across the world. And today we have reached a stage where if people are not part of the experiments, they feel left out. It's become such a powerful momentum in the company. Yeah, and that is how we are reinventing. So while our existing stream of revenues continue, our existing business model continues, the new business models are taking shape. Today we have digital-only brands where we are not using traditional media for communicating because we are proving the concept and then scaling it up. We are building profile. Now, HUL is a company which reaches 95% of the households across the spectrum of the society. So we are very data rich. The chief data officer sits on my top table. And historically, we have always maintained that people and brands are our biggest assets. Now it's people, brands, and data. Those three are our biggest assets. And that is how we are creating the new HUL.
There used to be a time when people would say, you know, for an IT officer or somebody who's a CTO of a CIO of a company, you don't get fired by using IBM, which is, used to be the saying at some point. I'm sure many of your marketers will feel you won't go wrong by betting on, putting some ads on a soap or on, IPL or whatever it is. So you're saying that somebody who's willing to experiment and try something differently, occasionally there could be backlashes, and you know what I'm talking about, it's happened very recently. You're saying that that's okay by you, to try new things, do different things. Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't work, but it's better for us to try it out than not try it at all.
Oh, absolutely. You know, in the new world, it's not the big who will beat the small. It will be the fast and the nimble who will beat the slow. So you need to completely change your structure of the business. You need to empower. Collaboration has to be a way of life. Experimentation has to be a way of life. And gone are the days when you can own the entire ecosystem. Yeah, you won't be able to do that. We're getting into a stage where increasingly more and more ideas are coming from outside. That's what I call as the open innovation. Anyone with a bright ideas come to us, we test it out, make a prototype and run with it. Earlier, we used to own every patent. Yeah, Unilever has something like 25,000 patents to its credit. Massive R&D labs. So all those things are being challenged today.
Vikram, if I may add a point and actually flip this whole discussion. As Sanjiv Mehta said, if incumbents build this mentality towards running projects, towards trying, failing, learning again, the kind of capability, talent, knowledge, access to data that incumbents have, no startup has that. So if
and
you
access
do
to capital, by the way.
And
The
access
amount of
to
money
capital.
that incumbent can throw at a particular problem is vastly more.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I was about to turn to you and saying, is all of this a little tougher for a public sector enterprise? Or
Not exactly. Probably that is the notion which everyone has, but I'll give you a couple of examples. First of all, I would like to give you a burning example of how we use technology in our financial dealings, and which also has disrupted. We all are aware about the famous Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana or PMUI scheme, by which the subsidized free of cost LPG connections are provided to poor people. Now, this whole scheme is heavily banking upon very high utilization of technology. Till 2014, you would recall that we used to have two rates of LPG cylinder, one for domestic, which was a subsidized cylinder, the other one was for a commercial, which was a non-subsidized cylinder. And a lot of LPG diversion used to take place because it's upfront subsidy, which was built into the prices, and we had dual pricing. all the three oil companies, IOC, BPC, HPC, we used to have our own customer database which was not talking to each other. We, with the government policy intervention, each consumer was encouraged, or each citizen was encouraged to open its own bank account. The banks came on board, the oil companies merged their database, and we came out with a scheme which was direct benefit transfer of LPG. The subsidy started flowing directly to the customer's account, and the LPG, instead of dual pricing, we led to single pricing. Subsequent to that, the PMUI was launched. So today, the scheme is heavily working with technology. If somebody applies for a LPG connection in Kanyakumari, the pan-India, the whole 25 crore database is scanned, and we are able to find out whether he has any other connection anywhere in the country or not. So what I'm trying to say is, any scheme of very large size can be successfully implemented with the adoption of technology. And today it works absolutely seamlessly. Now, coming to another issue, or the notion of absorbing disruptions or new technology or smaller developments within large organizations, although the large organizations might move slowly, apparently, but I think within the system they can be extremely efficient. We ourselves have a scheme of supporting startups, where we have more than 30 startups ongoing. We handhold them and we help them in commercializing. And that is our commitment. And I'm happy to share that a couple of global monopolies we have been able to break by Indian startups.
Okay, that's interesting. As I see that poll answer popping up there, Indian companies are ready for adoption of innovations, but not for creating innovations. 75% agree with that, 15% disagree, and 10% are saying can't say. Well, you know, I think there are a fair number of innovations that are being created also. I guess you have to see where to look for them. Can I just turn to the biggest, if I can ask all of you to sort of, if you had a crystal ball, you had to gaze into it. Let's just look 10 years out. Where are there areas and the opportunities? Is it technology? Is it the changes that you're going to see in the Indian economy? Where's the biggest opportunity coming from? We looked at the threat part of it, now the opportunity part. Mr. Mehta, you want to go first? Is it just going to be, I mean, for you as a FMCG company, perhaps a $2 trillion economy to $10 trillion economy, or is it technology?
Yeah. You know, I believe that I think India is at the cusp of greatness. We are today about a $2.5, $2.6 trillion economy. And if we were to extrapolate the growth rates of what we have delivered in the last 3 decades, we would be about a $7 to $8 trillion economy by 2032, bend the growth curve a bit, and we could very easily be a $10 trillion economy. Now that is, we are talking about the multiplier effect of growth starting to kick in as the size of the economy goes up. So that's a fabulous opportunity waiting for a company like ours to tap. That's one. Yeah. The second important bit clearly is that the aspirations of the people, the ambition of the people, the attitude of the people are changing dramatically. Today we are seeing that certainly in the rural part or the upper part of urban, the assortment is very similar to what we sell in urban India. Yeah? Because today, with technology, you're reaching, people know what the products are, and they also aspire for similar products like a city sleek guy does. So that's another big thing, waiting to be tapped. The penetration levels, like I showed you, the consumption levels are still so low. So from an opportunity perspective, I don't think there is any country in the world as attractive as India for a consumer goods company. Yeah, no question about that. Now, then it comes to a company like ours. How do we adapt ourselves to the changing environment? How do we become more nimble? How do we become more agile? How do we become more innovative? How do we harness the power of data and transform ourselves from a company which was hitherto great in mass marketing to massive customization? I believe that it's a fabulous opportunity where we can reach each consumer, understand them, cater to them the way they want, in content, what they want and when they want, and make a tremendous difference to their lives. So that is what we are on a journey from mass marketing to massive customization. And I believe it's going to be a very exciting journey.
That's fascinating. Mr. Singh, if I could turn to you next. The range of the opportunities and the sort of transformation that he's talking about, are you also seeing this? I mean, we worry so much. I mean, we live in a city like Delhi. We shouldn't be breathing, actually. It's unhealthy to take a breath. If we can hold our breath for a year or two, it's probably the right thing to do. Is that where you see some of the possible changes coming? Dramatic transformation will come, worrying about how we can fix emissions, getting clean fuel out there. Where else do you see the big opportunities?
I think with the growing economy, with the growing population also, the demand for energy is going to increase. If we look at the energy basket, probably the breakup will change. I mean, we'll be moving towards more cleaner forms of energy, including much higher percentage of renewable energy in the whole basket. The way we are consuming energy will also become much more efficient, which in my opinion is going to bring in a lot of change. If India, probably driven by the bigger objective of cleaner environment, the policies intervention will also happen, which is already happening in terms of, and India has tremendous potential of changing the global energy scene also. The biofuels are going to be a game changer because probably we are all looking at renewable energy as the big game changer. The biofuels, especially for a country like India where we can generate biofuels from the bio waste, I think it's a tremendous opportunity which I'm seeing. Let me share the number with you. Today, from bio waste to biogas, there is a potential of close to 100 million tons per annum to be produced in the country. Our annual growth is only 10 million tons. So even 10% of this conversion can hold our import dependence at the present level. So this is the potential these things have. Of course, this will involve some technological interventions. The data will remain, or the AI intervention will come in a very big way in the industry. Today, I agree with Mr. Mehta that probably much more insight to the customer behavior will tell us how we should be placing our products and how we should be placing our services. It has started happening, but I think the scope is immense as far as the utilization of AI is concerned. Many times we don't even realize how extensively it is being used, but I'm sure that in terms of value to the customer, it will deliver much better results.
Mr. Bajaj, turning to you finally on that one question. There are some experts who say, given some of the technologies that have already come into finance in the last 3 or 4 years, and also the overall environment, the trinity between the jam trinity, mobile phones plus Aadhaar, India stack, the way payments are going to evolve. Some people say that India is perhaps the single most exciting place for innovation, disruption, and opportunities in the financial services sector in the world. Would you agree with that? Or is that a hype to some extent?
No, I think there's a very clear opportunity. We've seen in the last 10 years how this has come true dramatically in a country like China. So China and India both have a very large consumption base, as we know, have actually skipped a few decades in technology. When you look at the Western world, they've been saddled with the technology that they've built over the last 2, 3, 4 decades. We are able to jump that and get to the latest technology as relevant. Now, China's already gone and shown the benefit of that. In the case of India, our time is now. So I agree with both the other Sanjivs that you will see, there's an opportunity at least to drive this over the next decade. And if I have to think within this, what can be 3 big changes in financial services? One, penetration of financial services in India is very poor. And increasingly at Finserv, we can see that our growth and our quality of customers in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 is better than in tier 1 cities, so outside of the top 100 cities. So the larger India has this huge opportunity towards financial services. Second, for certain industries, and very clearly for industries like ours, where a product is not a toothpaste or not oil which has to move or not a motorcycle, you will see customization of products and services right up to an individual customer level. So using data, using AI, customers will get products best suited to them. This has already started happening, not still at an individual customer level, but for much smaller groups of customers than earlier. So plain vanilla products will go out of the window. But the third biggest, I think, change that we are likely to see, and it's a challenge, if it doesn't happen, then it's a problem, is change in regulation. Regulation in financial services has been very incremental over the last, as I said, 100 years. And for some very real reasons, because the impact of that can be dramatic if you get it wrong. But the digital world is actually going to push the regulators into thinking through some of these changes fairly dramatically and fairly fast. For example, we all know today that RBI controls banking licenses. Now, I would like to ask, what is a bank? As Bajaj Finance, in the last 10 years, we have grown, and today by assets, we are probably bigger than 80% of banks in the country, and by market cap, we are probably bigger than 95% of banks in the country. We do all kinds of loans and compete with banks, but we are not a bank. So somebody may say, no, you can't open a bank account. That's why you're not a bank. But if you're a digital wallet, you have a digital bank account theoretically with the wallet, and yet a wallet is not a bank. I think definitions have to start changing, and this is the disintegration that fintech and the digital world is bringing in. The notion of what some of these institutions were will change dramatically.
Right. Just one last question from me, and then I'm going to throw it open to the floor. What you said about China is actually interesting, because some people say, if you want to look at what the path ahead of India can be, you do have some sort of a model. Look at what China has been doing, and perhaps similar sort of trends will start happening here. It's something, for example, that we kept in mind, that Chinese short video players are there, which went from 0 to 150 million users, 70 minutes a day, $8 billion of revenue from 0 to that in 4 years. That's the sort of disruption that can come. Is the Chinese example relevant for us, or should we, or do you think it's going to be a completely different path? Last comment. Mr. Singh, you want to say that?
To a certain extent, yes, because the kind of growth which they have seen in terms of GDP growth or population growth also, it had, I mean, we are in terms of GDP particularly, we are more or less following the same path. But I can talk about energy sector. While they are also growing pretty fast, their base is nearly 4 times of ours. And they are strongly regulated by their own government regulations, which sometimes makes the comparison not very real.
Mr. Mehta?
I have a bit different view here. If you look at China, China has followed the classical approach of an agrarian economy moving to manufacturing and now into services. India cannot be a factory to the world as China was. I don't think we have the competitiveness we should not crave. We could get into precision engineering in a big way, but not the mass end of manufacturing as China has become. I think we can leapfrog from agrarian to service economy or the frontier economy, where we harness the power of data in a very profound manner. We should not have the walled gardens of the West, where data is civilly protected by a few companies. And if we can open up data while being cognizant of the privacy issues, I think that would be a big boom for the country.
Let me just give an example over here. Of course, as I said, on the digital side, India has the digital stack. To that extent, we have far more advantages for our companies to innovate than China. Because if you're not part of the Alibaba or the Tencent or the Ping An ecosystem, you don't have all the facilities, the digital frameworks to work on. There is no open national system. To that extent, our starting point is superior. But so in Bajaj Finance, last year we did about 23 million loans. Our consumer loans all get approved in 30 seconds. And our algorithms run through 300 individual parameters for the customer and in 30 seconds decide whether to give a loan or not. I think the next best company in India probably does 50 parameters. So we used to feel very happy about it, very proud. And then about 2 years ago, because we send our teams regularly to different parts of the world, so they went to China and they realized that the better companies go through 4,000 different parameters. And when we came back, we realized that we capture 3,000 parameters within our company, but we are capturing it in different parts of the company. And we weren't able to put it all together because our technology stack, our framework was not designed for that. So the last 18 months, we were working on a project where we are creating this massive data lake where all this data from different parts of the company come into one place, which can then be used to create better solutions for customers. So in many of these things, China is way ahead of where we are. But they are great learnings for us. And as I said, we have a foundation in India with the digital stack that is far superior to what China has. And that will allow us to leapfrog, or allows the opportunity at least to leapfrog. But Vikram, I have a question for you before this gets opened up. You started off talking about how traditional TV, news, media is going through its own crisis. Today, many of us look at news on our phones. And a big issue that we have to deal with is fake news. I mean, I don't know what to believe and what not to believe anymore. And given your new initiative on the digital news space, how is this going to get, how do we as consumers know which news to trust and which not to?
No, I think that's an excellent question. Very happy to take that, because if you think about it, the news business in India is in crisis. Let's put that clear. And video news in particular. Print is better off, but video news is a really serious issue. And that's because from the television news companies, you're not getting subscription money, you're paying carriage fees, you're dependent on advertising. Advertising comes from TRPs. So you've got to do yelling and screaming and shouting and tantrics and Hindu-Muslim bashing and, shout at people as much as you can and get them to shout at each other. That's what's happening in TV. Digital video is still not easy to navigate, which is why most people are stumbling upon video, and that's where the crux of your problem comes from. They are stumbling upon video because they are chancing upon it on social media. WhatsApp forward, Facebook forward, that's where people are seeing their video. There's no authenticity. There's no definite way to find out whether this is correct or this is not. And good quality sources of content don't find distribution. That's the crux of the problem. And a solution will have to be found where at least the building blocks for that information have to be authentic and authenticated. You can layer your own opinion on top of it. But this is fact, this is what the news is, this is information, this is sacrosanct. On top of that, you can have your own views and your own opinion. The problem comes when you're combining the two and when you're actually faking the thing at the bottom. Now, we have our certain, at Editorji, we've come up with our sort of an approach that we build the building blocks with Legos of 15-second pieces of information and then allow people to layer opinion on that. That's one solution. Other people will come up with the solution. But I think at some point it is incumbent on all of us to figure out how we change this. Because this, to my mind, is almost an existentialist threat. If you don't know what to believe anymore, how are we going to... you can have a different opinion from mine. But if we can't even agree on what the reality is, then that's a scary position to be in. And that's not just in India, that's happening abroad. Look at the US, look at other areas. So yeah, I think this is a crisis area which has to be fixed. We have a particular view on it. I'm sure others will have their own.